Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the eCommerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and thank you again for joining us for another episode of Mentoring Moments. I'm here with my mate, Sean Mellis, once again, and we were just talking about a few things that I think are super relevant, especially in the world that we live in today, where there's this extreme dichotomy between people doing what they love and what they like and fills their cup versus doing what they feel they need to do to survive, right? And especially in a contracting economy, when we see interest rates going up around the world, we see people losing their jobs, especially in the tech space. I think there's 250,000 people that have lost their jobs now in the tech space. It affects us in e-com as well. We see all this happening. And so what we see oftentimes is people taking new jobs that maybe don't fill their cup, maybe don't make them happy, maybe don't make them feel fulfilled, but they have to pay the bills. And you're in the enviable position, Sean, that you're not married yet, you don't have kids yet, you don't have a mortgage yet, you basically have no debt, and you've just turned 30 years old, and you're in the prime creative time of your life. You're feeling more creative than ever before. You are finding success with your creativity, both in terms of fulfillment and emotional, feeling like you are really expanding and extending your natural skill set and extending that into new areas and learning at the same time. But also you found some modest commercial success in that too. You don't have to go into all the details, but I think this is a super valuable lesson for lots of people out there that are maybe struggling with, okay, maybe I can go and take this job that pays me whatever, or I can pursue a creative pursuit that may or may not be able to pay my bills. And maybe it won't pay my bills today, but it may pay my bills tomorrow. And that's a really difficult position for a lot of people to be in. And I think your story, specifically around this job that you were recently offered and you decided ultimately to turn down because it was going to effectively curb your creative output because of effectively a non-compete clause that would be in the contract of working with this company. I think these are super valuable lessons. So maybe you can share just briefly about the decision you had to make and how you arrived at the decision you finally made.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, as you mentioned, was offered a very lucrative job opportunity over in Europe by a sort of leading consulting firm to help them with a function of their business that I've already been doing for myself. So it would be building out AI courses, essentially. And this is something that I did back in February. I put out an AI ChatGPT focused course on Udemy. It went to number one in 4 weeks and is now sitting at about fourth globally. And that's continuing to produce an income for me. And this is a type of business that I've been longing to create as a service provider, having sold my time since 2017 and only just scraped by with the amount of profit that I can produce from selling my time. That business, that agency I was running never really scaled past a certain point. And that was quite frustrating. Someone who's exceptionally creative when it comes to building products, putting out content, that's what makes me happy, is creating things that people look at, use, experience, and it puts a smile on their face. And I want to create more of those things that help people, not just in their professional lives, but genuinely improve their lives in meaningful ways. And that's always been the common thread throughout my life, whether it was at university running student societies or working for other people and having side projects within those companies and helping certain businesses or professionals upskill and improve their resumes. Whatever the task has been, the joy that I get from helping someone out and improving their situation is greater than anything else. And I realized that, having worked with a few people in the past couple of months, that's really where I find happiness. And one thing that a friend of mine said to me recently was, you need to think about what's the thing that you want to do, not the thing that you should do. Follow your heart, not your brain. And just sitting on that and mulling on that, it's clear to me that pursuing my own path and building these other courses and building content and doing things that are ultimately going to satisfy me based on what I value and what's important to me is what's going to lead me to being happy. A big paycheck and doing that for someone else where I own none of the IP or the upside and can't do that for the people that want to be helped, who I would like to help personally. So It's tough. It's a very privileged situation to be in. I'll acknowledge that, where some people simply can't go down a path and do things that make them happy. They have to work in a role that's frustrating, that's stressful, that pays the bills. That's the only option they've got at that point in time. And that was very much the situation I was in 3 months ago, which is why I was eager to land something and move on from being a business owner and have a steady income. But I've been fortunate to have an income through the course, and I see an opportunity to build that out. So if you are at that sort of crossroad where you do have a little bit of traction and enough runway to support yourself to build the thing that is ultimately going to lead you to being in a better place and being happy, then I think go for it. If you can take on that risk, that's the risk every entrepreneur takes, and the ones that do well and come out on top, normally the ones who went ahead to build something that they also loved. It wasn't about the money. It was they truly loved doing this business, providing that service. And I haven't been in that place since building my first agency. I never truly loved what I did, but I really have now found that pastime where I can do it without expecting pay and still enjoy it. I'm going to go ahead and do that.
And look, man, I have such admiration and respect for you, because to turn down a potential high-paying position where you could potentially make partner in the company someday and have that stability and have that predefined paycheck. I know that when I first sold my business, my previous business, not my consulting business, my previous business years ago, my e-commerce pure play, when I finally sold that, I couldn't wait to actually become an employee again, because the stress of running that business and ultimately selling that business was so high that I was like, man, I can't actually wait to just get bossed around for a little while. I knew that it was never going to be forever, and I knew I would eventually want to do my own thing again, and now I've been privileged to be able to do. But I really enjoyed actually having a boss for a few years after that, because I could come to work, I could do my 9 to 5 or my 9 to 6 or my 9 to 7, whatever it ended up being, still better than being turned on 24/7 on your own business and thinking about it, stressing about it, and building it. But I really respect the fact that you did something in this intervening time between the time that you finished up and closed down your agency to potentially moving overseas and taking another role somewhere else. I think that you filled that time with creative energy and with creative passion. And it just so happened that aligned with a real strong need in the market at the same time around that topic. And so it was like a perfect marriage, right? You were doing it mostly for you. And it was like, no, I'll also put it out there just for anybody who might be benefited by this. It's not going to cost them a tremendous amount of money if they choose to buy my course. It's not going to cost them $5,000 to buy my bloody course, but it might help some people, and it might bring in a few coins to restock the bank account before I head off to Europe, kind of thing. And then you just found that it just had that happy coincidence where that combination of your passion, your art, your content, and the demand in the market met all at the same time. And that's a very happy coincidence. And now you've seen the power of that level of demand for your art, because it's your art. Let's be honest. It's an artistic output of you that then also has a commercial value. How awesome is that? You get to do something that fills your cup. And I use that term. There's kind of two terms that we often hear in the world: put your own mask on first, right? And do what fills your cup first. Because if we can't give from an empty cup, we don't have energy for family, we don't have energy for friends, we don't have any energy for work, we don't have energy for exercise. If we're depressed, if we're down, if we're not doing what our calling is, I don't want to get all spiritual and woo-woo here, but if we're not doing really what our heart tells us we should be doing, or we can't, or we're in a position where we literally cannot do what our heart is telling us we should be doing, that leads to some pretty dark places for a lot of people. And that ultimately means that it quenches their creative fire at the same time. And all of a sudden now, any creative energy they would have had is extinguished by the things that they have no choice but to do. And so I think that anybody who's in your position, I really admire you taking this difficult decision, but really not that difficult, in the sense that you pre-validated that there's actually a demand out there for your artistic outputs and your artistic passions, and therefore it can also pay the bills. So I think that there's a lot of people out there that are thinking and debating and questioning. I knew that, for example, when we moved from New Zealand to Mexico, I knew there would be a period of time where I wouldn't be as productive. I wouldn't be out landing new clients and necessarily doing as much client work. And I knew that my income would drop for a period of time until I really embedded myself into the North American space and became well known and started to land new clients again. But it was something that I knew would fill my soul. And so it was like, I got to do this. I have to have something to look forward to. We love traveling. During COVID, we didn't travel for 3 bloody years. So I feel like we're making up for lost time. And traveling fills my cup. New cultures fill my cup. New foods fill my cup. New experiences and challenges fill my cup. Adventure sports fills my cup. And if I can't do those things, then I'm less of a person. I feel like less of a human. I feel like less of a person. And I won't be able to give my all in the professional side. I won't be able to give my all in my family life and with my friends and with anything. I will be less effective at absolutely everything I do if I'm not following my passion. And like you, I'm in the very luxurious position, and I don't take that for granted at any point in time. I'm in the luxurious position of being able to follow my passion and also have a good business on the backside of that. So I feel just as privileged as you do, but I just wanted people to think about, before they jump into a decision that just purely looks commercially good and says, oh, this job will pay me more than I've ever been paid for any job ever before in my life. That's a very attractive thing, right? But sometimes that means that by definition, they expect that they're buying a part of your soul. They're buying their pound of flesh. They're buying your life for the period of time that you work for them. If they're paying you this astronomical amount of money, there's a reason why they're paying you and they're going to expect their pound of flesh back for that money. And so sometimes that pound of flesh is too great a compromise for people to accept and still feel happy and healthy. And so I think that's what I would encourage people to do, is to, sure, I've also said before, and this maybe sounds a little bit contradictory, you have to learn or you have to earn, right? If you're going to take a job working somewhere, as opposed to doing something independent like you're doing, if you're going to take a job, you have to do, in a perfect world, you'd have both. You would learn and you would earn, but you have to at least get one or the other out of the role. And if you're going to take a role in the short term, it better bloody pay pretty well so that you can see a pathway to freedom beyond that role. Or you have to be able to learn something so significant and skill stack that off the back of that, you're going to walk away and you're going to have something that's valuable for the rest of your life. And so these are the two things. I think you learn, you earn, or you do your own thing. If you see those nibbles of traction like you've seen, then I think you're in the perfect point of your life to go all in. There's zero downside risk for you. In 6 months, if it doesn't work out, well, then you can bloody go find a job at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the sentiment that's been echoed across my friendship group is you'll always be able to get a job, Sean. Like, you can always find yourself an income, particularly if you're building AI courses. It's going to be a pretty high in demand skill, and there's no reason for you not to give it a crack. So yeah, if you're in a similar position and have that luxury, I think you got to do yourself a service and follow where your heart's leading you and see what comes out of it. That's the result of all of the most successful people in the world, whether they're athletes, musicians, any type of artist, any type of business owner. They followed their intuition and didn't take the path that their parents wanted them to. They took the path that they wanted to ultimately be successful in. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, and look, I think, and I've said this to you before, and I think it's worth saying, you also need to know yourself. You also need to know your strengths, your weaknesses. You need to be self-aware. You've got two exceptional things for your age, and I recognized this from the very first time we sat down and we chatted together. I think you've got, on one end, you've got an extreme level of maturity for your age, and on the other end, you've got an extreme level of humility for your age, and that's a rare combination, right? That requires a high level of not only self-confidence in yourself, but also, the ability to have that high EQ to know what you're good and what you're weak at. And I think the other thing is, a lot of people make the mistake, in my opinion, it's a mistake of doubling down on stuff they're weak on, meaning that they will try to plug their gaps. They'll try to get better at all the things that they're not great at. But the problem that I have with that concept, and it works for some people, it's never worked for me. I've always doubled down on my strengths, and I've always hired for my weaknesses. I've always tried to find people that could plug the gaps in me. And I would rather double down on my strengths, because if I'm weak at something, let's say out of 10, I'm a 2 at something, even if I go all in on that and I study and I train and I learn and maybe I have a mentor or whatever, I might get to a 5, maybe, but I'm never going to be a 10 at that thing. Whereas if I'm a 7 or an 8 at something today, with a little bit more effort, with a little bit more time, with a little bit more love, with a little bit more commitment, I maybe could get to a 10 at that thing. And then it's going to make me be really super standout at that thing. And so I think that you are naturally creative. You're naturally visually and artistically creative. And let's say hypothetically you're at a 7 today. If you double down on that, you might just get to a 10, and that's going to be super standout. That's going to be life-changing, not just for you, but for anybody who comes into contact with your work. And so I think those two things, to me, are something that people need to also think long and hard about before they plot their next steps with intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff, my friend. Look, as always, loved our chat today. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your trials, your tribulations, your challenges with the audience, because I think you've been helpful for a lot of people. So I always appreciate your transparency and your openness.
My pleasure. Thanks for giving me the platform.
Anytime, my friend. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.